Everybody, I'm Marcus.
I'm Ryan.
And together,
we are the Northwest Sports Fanatics.
Wild Card Weekend.
Wow.
What a perfect name for that.
Right.
Wild Card Weekend. What a great way to kick off the NFL postseason. We had some great games this past weekend. We just want to go over a recap of the games and some of our standout players on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. The first game we want to kick it off and talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Indianapolis Colts.
Wow.
History?
Yeah, one of the best games, I think, not only playoff-wise, but just in general, period.
Yeah, we watch history. My quarterback from that game, Mr. Andrew Luck,
right.
Or my bad, the quarterback.
Right, the quarterback.
from that game, Mr. Andrew Luck, man. 443 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did throw for 3 picks. I think he was kind of rattled a little bit earlier in the game. But once he got his rhythm going, I mean, we are watching, and I repeat, the next Peyton Manning,
yep,
Tom Brady,
yep,
or Drew Brees.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to think he's doing these Hall of Fame statistics, you know, and in these games and these comebacks, and it's his second year. Just imagine when he gets into his 6th, his 7th, his 10th year, how good he's really going to be. If they can just surround some weapons around him, they're going to be scary good.
Hey, well, he does have one sidekick right now, and
right.
His name is Mr. T.Y. Hilton.
Right, T.Y.
Hilton. 13 receptions, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's a star in the making. I seen an interesting stat about him.
Mm-hmm.
He has the most, he's tied for the most 100-yard games in his first 2 seasons. You want to know who he's tied with?
Who's he tied with?
Randy Moss.
Okay, stud player.
And Mr. Torrey Holt.
Wow, Hall of Famers. So you can't go wrong there. So obviously he's proving that it's nice to have a great quarterback like Luck as your best friend. Huh?
Hey, he's a star in the making, man. T.Y. Hilton. What about on the defensive side of the ball? Any players that stood out from that game from you?
One key player I want to shout out is the OG that we talk about almost every week, the sack champion, Mr. Robert Mathis.
Oh, yeah.
He brings it every game, 2 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. It would have been nice to see him get maybe 8 or 9 tackles, but, you know, they have him in rotation, you know, getting some rest as well. But one key thing, he did win the Deacon Jones Award as a sack champion. Okay. And he ended up with a nice game, an extra sack and an extra forced fumble. So for the year, that puts him at 20.5, including the playoff game, and 9 forced fumbles. And I think that's the key. The forced fumbles is the part
that was huge. That forced fumble, it came up huge.
Huge, and that's usually the key difference between them winning and losing the game is that forced fumble. And obviously they had that miracle comeback, being down by 28.
Wow.
You know, no one thought in their right minds that anyone was going to come back from that game. And somehow, some way, 45-44 at the end of the day, the Colts are the champions over.
We haven't seen a comeback like that in the playoffs since the Bills and the Oilers.
Right.
Frank Wright.
Yeah, I was like 10 or 11 years old back then. That was pretty amazing. So shout out to the Colts and Robert Mathis and Andrew Luck. We'll see what they can do against the Pats this weekend.
Big game coming up. The next game happened this weekend is the New Orleans Saints versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
Another good competitive game this weekend.
Wow, what a game, man. For me, you know, Drew Brees did okay, but the offensive player that stood out to me the most is Mark Ingram.
Played well.
He played real well, or Mark Ingram.
Ingram.
As Chris Berman would say for his dad. You know, all our sports fanatics get that there.
Right.
But he had 18 attempts, 97 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and he played a huge part for me because Pierre Thomas was out injured.
Right.
So they needed him to step up, and he definitely did that. Drew Brees had his typical Drew Brees game. Nothing to brag about, but Mark Ingram really stood out to me. What about you on the defensive side of the ball?
On the defensive side, there's a couple players, but real quick to chime in on the offense, I think the MVP for that game on the offense was the O-line. Because without that O-line, there would have been no, you know, going forward for those QB sneaks with Brees. So you got to give a nice little shout out to that O-line, because without them,
shout out to Armstead, man. Rookie. His first start of the season is in the playoffs on the road, and you got to block Trent Cole.
Trent Cole, right? Yeah, what a task. But he actually did a pretty good job.
He did a nice job, too. So shout out to Mr. Armstead out
there. And then just to go to the defense real quick, Cameron Jordan. You know, defensive end. He's starting to make a name for himself. 3 tackles, 1.5 sacks. I thought that was a real key moment in the game with his sacks and his pressure. You know, he's 6'4", 287, 24 years old. So he's a a very solid up-and-coming player. He's going to be around for many, many years. But like I said, I think when it really comes down to it, it really comes down to that O-line. If the O-line for the Saints didn't play as well, and I think maybe just slightly that Sean Payton outcoached Chip Kelly slightly in that game just to get them that little edge. And like I said, if the play calling might have been just a few plays different, we might see Philadelphia moving on in the next round. So maybe next year for them.
Hey, shout out to Philadelphia, man. That was
a great season this year.
That was a great game, man. And all of these games was great, you know. So shout out to Philly. The next game we want to talk about here is San Diego Chargers.
Superchargers.
Versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
Right.
Wow. Upset?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones we've seen in a few years.
Real upset. It's bad because now everyone's getting on Andy Dalton. He's on 3 in the playoffs.
Right.
You know, and he hasn't looked too good. I think he's at like 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions. And,
one touchdown. Yeah, 1 touchdown in 3 years. So you got to get better production. I know he was a second rounder. You won the Rose Bowl at TCU against Wisconsin. So you didn't really expect a lot. You expected more from A.J. Green. But A.J. Green's held his part. So obviously he needs to hold his part as well.
Yeah, Mr. Dalton, you need to step your game up. But I want to talk about the offensive players with the Chargers. First off, Mr. Comeback Player of the Year to me, Phillip Rivers.
Sensational.
Wow, what a game he had. Now, his numbers is not going to jump off the stat sheet at you.
Right.
But the way he controlled the offense, made the first downs, moved the ball, 12 for 16, 128 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, he wasn't the highlight of the offense. To me, the highlight of that offense was, I'm about to say this.
Yep.
Ronnie Brown.
Right, and Danny Woodhead.
Wow.
We got those 2 guys.
8 carries, 77 yards, and the long touchdown run would kind of seal the deal for them. Wow, what a game by Mr. Ronnie Brown, who a lot of teams just threw away in the junk pile, and San Diego brought him in, and he's kind of resurrecting his career towards the tail.
I don't think I've seen him play that consistent since the Auburn days, back when he was with Cadillac back there with Jason Campbell.
Maybe that one year when he had the Wildcat down in Miami.
Right.
And
that was a pretty good year. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you on the defensive side of the ball?
On the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of names that you can mention, but one that really stood out to me is a kind of a no-name player, Donald Butler. He's a linebacker for him, 9 tackles, 1 forced fumble. It's his 4th season, right? He's a 3rd rounder from UW, from Washington.
Oh, okay.
And, I thought he was a catalyst of that defense. You got Manti Te'o. He's just coming back from the injury. You got Jarrett Johnson from the Ravens. So they have a lot of pieces there. Ingram, Weddle. So they got a lot of pieces, but I thought Donald Butler was the key reason why they won that game. And I don't think anyone really thought that the Chargers' running game and their defense would show. And they really did come to play against the Bengals on the road. And now this team is scary because you got to think they play Denver Broncos, right? And who was the only team to beat Denver Broncos at home this year? San Diego Chargers. So we'll have to see this weekend.
2 great quarterbacks going against each other, Peyton and Phillip. So that's
probably the best quarterback that's never won a Super Bowl in our era. In the last probably, I would say, 15 years, in the last 15 drafts or 20 drafts, he's probably the most talented QB that doesn't have a ring.
I can agree with that because he does have the incredible stats.
Right.
All right, and the last game of this past wild card weekend was the San Francisco 49ers against the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau.
Right.
It wasn't as cold as everyone thought it was going to be, but it was still cold.
Right.
Of course, the 49ers came out with the win. Colin Kaepernick.
Played great.
Wow. He got it done on the road. 227 yards, 1 touchdown.
Right.
But what stood out to me is the 98 yards rushing that he had and the moments that he gained those 98 yards, picking up key first downs and the last first down towards the end that allowed them to run the clock down a little bit more.
Right. Key 3rd down runs to get that first down, using his legs, kind of like Cam Newton does.
Yes.
I mean, you really made it happen. And that was a game you could have let slip away, but Kaepernick really took that leadership role, and I was really proud of what I saw.
Yeah, I was real impressed by Kaepernick from that game there. But what I'm more impressed by is his sidekick. He's been playing with a whole lot of different swag since Michael Crabtree came back.
Right.
And Crabtree, 8 receptions, 125 yards. And you can tell with him back, that offense is a totally different offense.
Right, and it opens it up for Vernon Davis, too. So when he gets down and he's going to the post routes, he gets, not all those double teams as much. So it does leave the opening since you got Crabtree, Brad.
Don't forget Anquan Bolden and Frank Gore.
Right.
So that 49er team, man, I told y'all before the playoffs started, look out for this team. They on the roll, and they definitely continue that in Green Bay.
Right.
Now, what about on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, considering the Niners are probably the hottest team, going into the playoffs, they're smoking hot. You went to an NFC Championship game, a Super Bowl. It didn't really work out the way that you wanted. This could possibly be the year. The key player I thought in the game was Ahmad Brooks.
Oh.
Their linebacking core and their D-line might be arguably the best in football. Like I said, he had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Now that gives him 10.5 sacks for the year and 2 forced fumbles. But it seems like every game that we watch on the Niners, it's always Ahmad Brooks,
making a play,
Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, right? You got Justin Smith, Aldon Smith. I mean, with those 5 guys, it's arguably, there's not a better 5 tandem on defense than those 5 right now. And I think with those guys playing the way that they are, Carolina is, I think, a little bit in trouble. They got the home field, but if those players play like they have in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, Niners are going to move on and advance possibly against Seattle in the NFC, obviously, championship game.
Hey, that's an exciting wild card weekend of football. Y'all stay tuned. We're going to give y'all our division championship preview of the games coming up, and also our NBA take.
Yeah, so we'll go over a recap after, obviously, this weekend's games, and we'll obviously go over all the games for you. Shout out Northwest Sports Fanatics. Stay tuned to the next video.
Northwest Sports Fanatics.
Northwest Sports Fanatics.